Hi, thanks for starting this. I'm Mark Sale. I'm at Satara, Vice President of the IDD group. And I'd like to thank our speakers, Drs. Hooker and Zhao and Rostami and Dr. Lukacova. And I'd like to introduce the new members of the panel who will be involved in this discussion. We'll start with Dr. Stella Grosser. Dr. Grosser is the director of the Division of Biometrics in the Office of Biostatistics at Cedar FDA. Her division provides statistical support to the Office of Generic Drugs, and she's been with the FDA for 21 years, starting as a statistical reviewer for new drugs, and then serving as a team leader before assuming her current position. Dr. Rebekah Jereb is a scientist in clinical development at Sandoz in Slovenia, and she has expertise in PBPK modeling and IVIVC, IVIVR, and has developed various PBPK models for regulatory purposes. Dr. Carl Peck is an adjunct professor at UCSF and is co-founder and expert consultant at NDA Partners and ProPharma. He has a long career with interest in quantitative clinical pharmacology and has published more than 175 peer-reviewed papers and chapters. And he's the former director of the FDA Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. Dr. Rada Savic is a professor at the University of California, San Francisco, and is associate director of the UCSF Center for Tuberculosis. Her research focuses on data integration and modeling for special populations, including children and pregnant women. I'd like to remind everyone to type their questions into the chat box. We'll try to answer as many as we can get to. There have been a number of questions already posted that have been addressed. If there's the plan is to not go back and revisit those questions. If there's additional questions, additional discussion, clarification required for those, I'd ask the original poster to go ahead and resubmit an additional question. We'll try to get to it. So we'll start with the first question. The questions that have been posted seem to fall into two sort of general categories. The technical questions about power of different study designs, and more general, and I suspect that may reflect the audience, the strictly scientific audience, and perhaps questions from other stakeholders who are more focused on logistics and implementation, and perhaps even legal questions around this. Some of these were touched upon, practical questions about what these models are going to look like, where they're going to go, who's responsible for them. And I'd like to start with that. Dr. Rostami touched on this briefly as well, but I think there's still a lot of open questions about this. So I'd like to start with the question of who is expected to submit and maintain the model master file. And I'd like to ask if Dr. Zhao from FDA has any insight into that question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Sale, for the introduction and the question. Good summary, good intro. It's a great pleasure to see all the colleagues here and to embark on this new but meaningful effort, model master file. I want to make a overhead statement before we proceed. Everything regarding model master file still is planning stage. So the comment and input from you will be very valuable in shaping this model master file process and make it usable to all the people in the modeling community and in drug development. That's the overall statement. Regarding with the first question, who could be the owner? I think the general answer is everyone could be the owner, except for FDA employees. And it could be from academia, could be from industry, could be from a consulting firm. Anyone who would like their model to be reused in the applications can have a master file. Having said that, I think currently for the drug master file, we want to keep everyone be informed on a key feature that given the capacity of FDA, the agency won't review a drug master file until it is associated with the drug application. Then the review will be associated with the drug master file afterwards. So similar things can be applied to model master file. So even though you can be an owner, you can freely submit a drug master file, but that doesn't mean FDA will immediately review it, would agree on it. Only when a certain application package refers to it, then we'll be serious on it, see whether it can be used in the application. Under the reviews, everything will be associated with the model master file. And for in the future, if another reviewer encounters the same issue under the same model master file has been referred, then referenced, then it will save big time for the reviewer to review what have happened with the previous review cycle for the previous application, and then save time and increase review quality and the consistency. And it also certainly it will give the industry lots of benefit. That's the current preliminary thinking regarding who could be the owner. But the owner, even though it could be owner, but the file may not be immediately reviewed until it's associated with the actual application.
But that wouldn't be a requirement for a model to be included in an NDA, that would be submitted as a model master file. They could, at least in the interim, continue to be submitted as they are now.
I think we need to maintain some flexibility. If you can go with the conventional way, if the model is kind of an integrated piece of the application. However, if the model is from, you want to use the same model for another application from the same firm, or the model was originally developed by a third party, the third party could opt to use model master file to maintain it.
Mm-hmm. I see.
That's the
yeah,
thinking.
and I can see that being a practical advantage as companies have a backbone, a large molecule backbone of some kind, for an ADC or something else, and could reuse that model more easily, more efficiently, with minor modifications. There would be a business model to be made for that, supporting the model master file rather than just a standalone submission.
Absolutely. I would welcome any of the colleagues in the panel to share your thought, input, that highly valuable. See Viera raise up.
Yeah, if I can speak, I actually have more of a follow-up question on it. Maybe you could share your thoughts on this. If a third party is the party that actually owns the model, but it won't get reviewed until some sponsor company actually applies it within their application, would the communication on the model review and voicing the concerns, asking for improvements in the model, be with the sponsor company or with the third party that actually created the model and owns the model? So would the owner of the model get the feedback from the reviewer directly, giving an option to improve the model, so that when it shows up on your desk with another sponsor company, you are already looking at the improved model?
Yeah, Viera, that's a very, very key question that we need to put into consideration. Before I address that, I think the panel is not a Q&A to FDA. There's
sorry, I didn't mean it that way. Yeah.
Welcome everyone to share your proposals, ideas as well. While we are posing questions here, and what's your preference regarding with that? I think, if the communication, we are having reference again to drug master file. If there is a question regarding the drug facility or manufacturing or drug substance, question will be communicated with the owner. The owner will be the sole party to communicate with FDA to address the questions. So we are kind of envisioning same thing could happen for model master file. Then the owner would be the party who would communicate with FDA and address the questions. And then the model will be upgraded or updated based on the response. And then for future reference, then the latest model, which is owned by the owner, will be used instead of the model that haven't gained FDA's acceptance.
Another option would be to sort of take the Wikipedia or the GitHub approach and fork a model and keep the parts that you want, modify the parts that need to be modified, and then perhaps the FDA would only need to review the parts that changed.
Yeah, that's also a great point. I think Rada raised the hand.
Right. Well, hi, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today. So I just wanted to share our experience at UCSF. So clearly, we are not pharmaceutical industry and we have different experiences, but nevertheless, we work in the area in academic drug development and NGO drug development, sponsored drug development, where there's a lot of data and model sharing going on. So we do have a lot of experiences in that space. And it's been really changing. It's been really such a good thing that enabled the field of data and model sharing and clinical trials and to progress and develop at much faster pace and really resolve a lot of questions that arise. And rather than you always can go back and say you need another study. I think we're in the space where you say, okay, there's that model that can help you understand what that study would provide, and therefore you might not need the study, and it's better to do a model integration or model sharing to basically address the question you want. So I'm just a really big advocate for this initiative, just witnessing how much it accelerated the drug discovery and development and model development in the academic and NGO arena. And there are different really ways to share the knowledge. Either we can discuss technical details through GitHub, or and there's also a lot of different like more on the basic science side where people do share their models, and there's a lot of experiences from other fields where model sharing is also ongoing, and where the model averaging is happening to resolve a number of questions. So I just wanted sort of to share our experience, and I'm happy to talk more about it, but we've seen really only positive come out if you can resolve clearly the legal barriers and others in which clearly I can't speak to. So thank you.
Yeah, I suspect that the vast majority of the scientists on this call, which I assume is the vast majority of the call, would support that position. And the model sharing environments that have been established, I think have been useful. They've been fairly small scale so far. This obviously is a much larger, much more ambitious approach that would include some model validations, some model acceptance criteria, as well as just lots and lots more models. With the associated legal issues that have been raised, legal proprietary intellectual property issues that have been raised. But I suspect that, again, most of the people on this call are scientists, would love to see this happen. There will be some challenges in getting the other stakeholders on board with it. But I guess the answer to the question ultimately is that there will be an original poster, which could come from any source, but the model will not be, I'm not sure what the right word is, validated, qualified, accepted until it's associated with an NDA.
Yeah, or IND. An IND.
Okay, an IND. So that there will be no metformin model in this database.
Yeah, at this point we are speaking from generic perspective. I think is mainly referring to pre-ANDA meetings of ANDA submissions. We are also in talk with the new drug side, see what we can coordinate.
Has there been any thought given so far, and I realize this is still very preliminary, to somehow incentivizing companies to do this. This is a significant amount of effort that they will have to put forward. The lawyers will have their questions about this. I don't know any thoughts about what carrot might be available from the FDA to incentivize companies to participate actively in this.
I think it's could be market driven. Right? It's not a mandated. You know, we see the need, and we see the need, and we want to serve the community. We have a new value, and things will pivot around with this model master file. It could have formed a new ecosystem. You know, then from starting from that point, then the community may become more efficient in terms of model sharing and model development.
I think so. Other discussions? Andrew?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I mean, if we have a market-driven procedure where I guess then people who have developed the drug, some drug and have a model for that drug would then get paid for other people to use that model. That's going to raise the cost of all of the generics, right? So what's to hold back the generic prices going off and costing just as much as the original substance?
Yeah, Andy, thanks for that thought. You know, we didn't crack the conversation go to the economic side of it, but since you raised that concern, we should thank Dr. Peck. Last time he brought a very legally knowledgeable expert, Dr. David Feigl, into the May workshop, and he kind of think, you know, the model matter file could potentially be treated as trade secret. However, you know, that the only protection mechanism against the trade secret is the I'm referring to him, doesn't represent my own or legal interpretation. This is more like a personal view. The trade secret only being protected by keeping it a secret. You know, everyone else in the same time can discover independently the same thing, publish it, and have another you can publicize it or have your own model master file. I don't see there would kind of dampen the drug development or model sharing. I only see it will incentivize the model sharing. Everything has pros and cons. You know, we predict that in the long run, it will increase the awareness of regulatory acceptance. In my presentation, I also think one distinction between model master file and drug master file is that for model master file, we as a community could establish a mechanism or value to announce the regulatory acceptance of model master file, or you know, if we can share the regulatory acceptance of a model which is currently not existing, then I think that will incentivize many modelers. Oh, FDA has done this. Only in the past, we only share those information on sporadic, unsystematic conferences, publications. If people don't publish that, still, you know, nobody, whether it stay at the model master file or not, people don't know it. Now we have a mechanism, model master file. I don't think it will make things go to the other side. That's my thinking.
And I think that makes some sense. Certainly would incentivize the scientists to have their work out there and recognized as being useful. And I think there is a market opportunity even sort of within a company to reuse their models for regulatory purposes. Again, this is not a Q&A for FDA, so I don't expect Dr. Zhao to be answering all these questions, but I think that there is one could make a market case for even a given company to participate in this repository in their own self-interest, I hope. Certainly the scientists, I suspect that all the scientists in this call would say this is a great idea. There are other stakeholders, so probably should move on. Lucy, you want to pick? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, actually,
Amin?
we have
Amin?
Rebekah and Amin. They want to comment on this one.
Is it me?
Yes.
Just two comments. Going back to what Andy actually said with regard to to the model on increase of the sort of the cost. I think we have to balance it against conduct of a full-blown clinical study. So when you put it that this model master file may save them of a sort of a study of minimum of 500,000 or sort of in some cases complex generics 2-3 million, then sort of we see the perspective completely changes. That's number one. Number two, I think all the discussions here are, in my view, they are going towards, and that was in actually Murray Desham also had the same in the discussions, that they are looking at the model as sort of this is specific to that drug. There are elements that obviously that they relate to the application for a specific drug formulation, etc. But if we have got adequate sort of, I would say, common elements of that model, we are taking that element and applying it, so therefore there are different levels of this. Now, whether as part of the submission, the way that drug information went into the system is a trade secret and they don't want to share it, that is a different matter. But otherwise, the model master file, I think that is, sort of my view on the PBPK side, particularly, would be that this is a common thing that definitely, verified with several sets of data. And you are talking about only the application that has been submitted, to FDA on a particular drug, and everyone else can reuse it.
But they would update it in some way, and so it would need to be branched or forked or something.
Yeah, for the system parameters, yes, they need to be updated, and that was my question: how regularly that needs to be, sort of, and the reasoning, whether sort of actually we need, sort of when it is, report comes that from 10 different experience, it's all the time underestimating, overestimating, or something, then you need to do something about it. But if we look at sort of a specific drug and the old way, so it is change of philosophy, Mark. So if we are only going on the basis of this set of clinical data that we have got to change the model, this is not what we are talking about, because the model is built on the back of much larger sets of data, which they were not relevant to that particular drug. It was much wider. That's right.
Which could be reused without.
Yes, which would be reused. Exactly. Yeah.
Question from Rebekah? Comment from Rebekah?
Yeah, I hope you can hear me well. So I was thinking back to what Liang said. So who should be submitting the models? If this would be the firms, I was just wondering if this would mean that the model master files would be publicly available and anyone could use them, or was there any thinking done on that side, or would be just model master files could be used by the same applicant for different purposes for the same drug or different drug, depending on what exactly would be the structure of the model master file?
I'll let Dr. Zhao answer, but it sounds like a spectrum of answers have been proposed, from publicly available to keeping parts of it trade secret in some way, which seems like a technical challenge to me. And then Dr. Hooker actually seemed to briefly suggest that there could be a marketplace for these models.
Yeah, Rebekah, sorry, I see Viera raised the hand. Probably we can let Viera go first.
Yeah, I just wanted to, that actually was partly already addressed by Amin, right? That we need to look into this as a different levels of the support or the master file. So if we are talking about the general system specific parameters, those are already used by anybody, right? I mean, those are the parts that everybody can use and everybody is using in the different commercial platforms. When it comes to the specific product towards a specific drug, this is where it would become a little bit more, this is where we might be running into those legal issues as to who is submitting the master file, what was it based on, right? And again, even with that aspect, even if we are looking at specific compound or a specific drug product, there are still different levels, right? Me looking at it from PBPK part modeling, a lot of information about the compound itself, you might be already in the public space, right? From the publication, so the baseline model could be built and different companies could start applying it to their specific drug products. So, depending on what is the level, who is submitting it, it could be applied within the same company or across different companies for different purposes. And just one more word to Andrew's and Amin's comment on the market, would it be driving the prices up? I think the point is not comparing it only against the cost of the clinical study, but also against the cost of the model development, because companies are already making the investments in building the models, right? So now if 5 different companies are working on it, 5 different companies are already making the investment in building their own model from scratch. So this would be just paying somebody else for it or using a publicly available model. So.
Yeah, thanks, Viera.
Thanks. Rada, you had another comment?
Yeah, I do have just a comment with respect to the point that the models are trade secrets. My view is that I think there is fairly low likelihood that if you share the model, that your model will be used as such for different purpose, for fitting somebody else's data. I think it is possible, but I think the more value in model sharing is to understand the structure and to understand the parameters and to understand how somebody else has approached the problem that you might be facing yourself with your own data. And it's really more about understanding and integrating the knowledge that various developers have accumulated rather than taking the model as such and refitting your own data so you don't have to build your own model and therefore you're using somebody's potentially trade secret. So I think and I think what Amin spoke earlier is that really the parts of the model that can contribute to this a larger picture that we all need to know. And I really see model sharing more as if you share your model, it's very likely that in that model sharing repository, there will be something for you as well down the road. And you might find a piece of information that's very helpful to you sooner or later. So I really think there's more in it for you rather than, that somebody will sort of utilize whatever you have developed. And I think if that's the umbrella that we want to operate under, I think, everybody will be a winner. I think it's going to be a win-win situation.
That would be the goal. Yes, and I agree. I think that we can move the entire community forward by doing this. I'll be interested to see how it evolves and what the other stakeholders view about accessing part of their data, which is essentially what they're doing. They're sharing some of their data that they spent money to collect with other people. Other comments on the first question?
I think Amin, maybe we.
Oh, yes, he does. I have trouble seeing his little hand.
The comment to Rada's, sort of view is going back, the same thing that Murray said. I think we are talking about here, sort of not the traditional philosophy fitting. I think, this is the where we get, these mixed up, sort of. So the model that we are having is not a sort of a set of 2 sets, 3 sets, 5, 10 differential equation that is related to recovering what we have observed. It is much bigger than that. So therefore, what we are actually discussing, I think sometimes there is a disconnect between that and the way that I see model master file, because model master file as I said, it's not specific to any drug. The only part that, going back to what Liang was saying, that becomes a secret, in fact, is not the provider of the model master file, because, model master file, even the commercial one, they are available for everybody to go and use. And in fact, when you go to their library, all the data is available, you can see. And to add to that, at least in the case of SimSip, we have got 1,000 papers that they, sort of internally or externally, they have gone through and actually published on different aspects, including, equations that are in the background, etc. This trade secret, in my view, in this case, is how the person who was applying it managed to get something from, let's say, in vitro study, whatever, whether they were using, I don't know, sort of hepatocyte, whether they were using, the I don't know, microsome, whether they were using, if it was skin, microperfusion, or whether they were using microdialysis, what they got from what system and plugged into their model that was available in a way that they could show sets of verifications and convince FDA to accept what they were saying for the projection that they were doing for the next set. This is going to be the secret. This is the one that the model master holder, in this case, let's say separate organization, GastroPlus, SimSip, whoever, or, our model that, sort of Andy was talking about, a bigger, model of it, or what Metrum has got. I think that is not, sort of bit that is the actually trade. The trade secret is that how that was used as part of the submission and got accepted. That is, that is something that whoever is applying may not want to share with others, unless there, unless there is enough in the, sort of in the public. I think, for instance, the way that we have got in the OCP, all the drug-drug interaction with 3A4, there is so much publications and, so-called trade secret and how to plug things in and get something out that you don't need, to know how, I don't know, 2007, Roche managed to get, something, or in 2012, J&J, sort of had a sort of a successful submission, or Novartis, etc. Because the secret is out, whether they tell us what they did or not, whether it is redacted from their clinical OCP, review, it doesn't matter. There is so much there that they can go and rely on.
Because it was presented at meetings or in publications, or because it's incorporated into SimSip.
Because they are so much independent of those companies. There is sometimes academic, sort of all the others, they have shown all those verifications, and in some cases SimSip themselves, they have added so many verifications that basically
but that's
you don't
a slow
need
process. That's a very slow process.
Yeah,
it doesn't lend itself to sort of rapidly reusing these models in a period of potentially a few months.
Yes, I agree that at the beginning, so whoever is using for the first time and there is nothing out, this is the bit that we are talking about, trade secret. Otherwise, the others, they don't have much of a trade secret. The platform is out, equations are out. It's just basically who is used for that particular de novo application first time, and they may not want to share that with others.
Right. And so there's a delay of several years at least before this becomes widely known. And I think that's the goal, is to avoid that several-year delay. Okay, other
Dr.
Carl. Hi, Carl.
Okay, well, listen, at the risk of making this a one-question panel discussion, we actually had 4, and we haven't gotten past the first one yet. But it just occurred to me that there's no reason why FDA itself could not qualify a model and provide that in the master file. In fact, there was an attempt some years ago in the Office of Clinical Pharmacology to make FDA-vetted disease progress models available. There is a class of models that we haven't discussed so far, which I would call statistical models. FDA basically established the 2 one-sided t-test for bioequivalence as a universally desirable and accepted model for confirming bioequivalence. So that's in my view a legacy model that could be considered in the master file. There are competing models, statistical models, that are being evaluated in various settings, which might at one point become acceptable for FDA and its regulatory decisions. So I just advanced the idea that FDA itself should be, one of the potential contributors to their master file, and they're in such an amazing position, having seen so many applications and so many, successes and failures. Conceivably, they can come up with a model for a particular situation, including a statistical model that would, and there would be no competition over ownership of the model. So that's my comment.
Okay, Andrew, Dr. Hooker?
Yeah, I agree with Carl that the FDA should have a large role in qualifying models and saying that this model is qualified for this purpose. I think that, as I see it, that would be the role of this, one of the main roles of this model master file.
Yeah, Andy, before I make
for me,
further comment, I do have a clarification question to you and Dr. Peck. Do you mean FDA can qualify a model for a certain purpose before it is associated with any application? Are you talking about that? If it's associated with the application, then yeah, at the end, FDA need to make a recommendation whether we are accepting the modeling result or not. So are you referring to when a model is not associated with anything yet, any application yet, you still want FDA to certify a model for purpose? If that's the case, there's no current standing mechanism. The user fee is not paying for that. It doesn't prohibit you the call from you and Dr. Peck.
Yeah, I don't think it's a bad thing to think that the FDA could spend some of its the fees that are collected on validating or qualifying models, even if there's it hasn't been used for a specific purpose yet. But I think that it makes, at least the way I'm thinking about things, if you have a set of drugs that are going off patent pretty soon and people are going to start applying for bioequivalence, trying to make bioequivalent products, then either before people start applying, then you can say these models are approved for this purpose for assessing whatever, or as the first bioequivalence application comes in, then you can take the models from that application and approve them for that purpose. But I guess the point I'm feeling, I'm very much for having more open than closed. So I think the FDA also has the opportunity to, the problem I see is that if a drug company has developed some product and they have a model for it, their motivation for putting it into a master file so that somebody else can make a generic of just that compound and they start losing money, there's not a lot of incentive for that to happen. So it seems like one thing is good to have a market, but another way to go would be to have FDA say that you have to have these models in a master file in some way. Sort of require. I think that we're already required to submit models in application process. So forcing the development of these master files could be another way to go. It's just another way things could happen.
Yeah, one thing I want to make sure that both you and Dr. Peck, that your comments are really, really important to us. We are hearing it in a very serious manner. So we may want to formulate a palette more mimicking emerging technology program under Office Pharmaceutical Quality. If there's emerging technology, then there's a value for industry to discuss with us. We may, your comment may stimulate a thought in terms of a palette. We can discuss some like model breakthroughs or model utilities, even though without association with application. For example, there's a breakthrough in terms of computational fluid dynamic model, which could be used to accurately predict the local long regional deposition, which has been, being stuck in, which been stalling many kind of lean regulatory pathways for already inhaled products. So that could be a case, for example. Thanks for the valuable input.
So Liang, on the subject of user fees supporting this, the user fee program encourages the publication of guidances. What is a master file? It's basically a collection of guidances. So I don't think there's any issue there at all. You just tell Congress and the stakeholders in the PDUFA renegotiations that this is a new form of guidance.
May I chime in here? I think we talk about, I clearly hear the passion, and you guys made a request for FDA to qualify certain models even before it is associated with certain application. I think another challenge I can say is the model the validation is really depends on the intended purpose. So if you have a model master file there, if we don't really clarify or specify the intended use, so that qualification, what you are asking for FDA to do, can be pretty challenging. I mean, just a thought there. And also, Andy, you brought up a good point. You said, okay, everybody's passionate about the model master file because it's good for the greater good for the whole community. But where is the incentive for the individual applicant? And they may hurt themselves in certain way because other people can use that model master file, for example, for generic drug development. Right. But I think if we can really collectively come up some ways to help them, for example, even for innovator company, that if they have a qualified model master file can help them, for example, to support their formulation change, then to me, that's a way to make incentive for themselves. So anyways, we had a lot of discussions just now on who owns the model master file, and I think we better move to the second question. Yeah. But the second question is,
I'd like to make one very quick comment that
please.
About is there a potential risk for, if you do insist that companies, when they submit a file, they go through the whole qualification process, submit it to as a model master file, that would provide a disincentive for them to submit their very best model? Any risk of that? But moving on, question 2.
Yeah.
So one quick question. I think I also see an audience question. There are instances FDA can think of where they could have found model master file inadequate for a particular drug product. So that's kind of associated with your comment, Dr. Sale, that whether what if they haven't submitted the best model? I think if it's associated with the application, so the model in the stage of submission may be different from the model that that received FDA acceptance. The model received the acceptance should be the model that's being kept for future use. That's my quick comment.
Yeah.
Many times we found the model is inadequate, but we will communicate that back to the modelers in industry.
I've gotten those communications myself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we are moving to the second question. Actually, we already touched upon in our discussion for the first question. So the question is, will the model master file be upgraded or be updated dynamically? Can someone else other than the owner update the model? I guess the question is, essentially the end of the day is what will be the process to update a model? So it's a very abstract question. So
yeah, I think it's more like a process related. Other than the owner, who else have the access to the model? It must be the owner in that way. So I also want to welcome Stella. Sorry, Stella, to put you on the spot. In terms of for statistical models during the review, how do you guys ask people to upgrade the model? You know, if you found it's inadequate, I guess it's a maybe a cliche question, but it, you know, gonna be good if you share some experience.
Sure. We will send information requests. We will send criticism of a model, often with our own analysis thereof, and we will. I guess what I'm finding lacking in a lot of this discussion is a sense of what standards of evidence are adequate for acceptance, right? And so in a lot of other settings, I mean, there's a lot of discussion in new drugs, in the Office of Medical Policy, in the Office of Biostatistics, within FDA, within CEDAR, of what constitutes enough evidence, adequate evidence for regulatory approval. And I think we need to establish those standards for models as well. You know, even little things like how many simulations do we need? I mean, in the Office of Biostatistics, we have a number. I don't see that number being used elsewhere. And so it involves a lot of interaction, I'd say, with companies, with scientists, and there's, so that's in the review process. Before it gets to the sort of the final package, there are pathways now. I mean, Dr. Peck was talking about PDUFA, and I'm not sure that this exists under GDUFA, but within the new drug area, there are, you know, fit for purpose, maybe not fit for the future, as Amin was saying, but there's fit for purpose discussions and submissions that, you know, use a lot of resources, but that we are expected to devote those resources based on the latest PDUFA agreements. Yeah, so that's, and there are biomarker qualifications. I'm also thinking about biomarkers as a analogy to models, and perhaps I have a naive or end user view of this, but to me, there's something analogous and some similarities that could be developed there. And we have a process for qualifying biomarkers. That again, analogies could be drawn and pushed back to model development.
Thank you, Stella, for the biomarker story, because that relates back to what Dr. Peck and Dr. Hooker mentioned earlier. If a model is not associated with a particular application, can still be reviewed, qualified by the agency. Then thank you for providing the biomarker case, you know, that could potentially be possibly following that model.
But in all those cases, this is Amin, but in all those cases, you know, the owner of that biomarker, or, you know, in our discussion, the model master file, I think we have to separate that from whoever is applying.
Sure.
If we separate that model master file owner and not being the company who's applying, but they are basically just putting application, of course it is in the favor of whoever is providing that many more companies, you know, different people are using, unless you get engaged with, you know, some company says, I help you to qualify, but then, you know, I am going to stop you for the next 5 years of, you know, sort of, you know, disclosing any of the ways that we have, you know, qualified. In all other circumstances, apart from that restriction, the owner of the model master file, together with the verification, they want, you know, to all the different, you know, generic industry to come and use that. So I don't see, you know, that, you know, sort of as a problem if we separate that. If the model is built by a certain, let's say, company during the development, you know, as an innovator, etc., that's a different matter. You know, I see that completely different. Yeah.
I think Stella's made a very good point. There
Thank you.
needs to be a guide for qualification of the model, and in typical FDA fashion, it ought to be really exercised every possible way. The way it could go wrong, the way it could, misinform. So I think that's a very good suggestion that if this is implemented, there be guidances and procedures for qualifying the model so that it doesn't mislead.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Yeah, and that goes back to your point about guidances and FDA, which again might stall things because, as my colleagues can confirm, guidance is a long drawn out process. On the one hand, on the other hand, I think it's critical. So.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stella. Let's go to Rebekah and go to Mark.
Yeah, the problem I see now is because I have a feeling we're mixing everything up. So
yeah,
we're talking about model master files, and then we're talking about more the platform or the system parameters, which is what Amin is usually talking about. And then we have the models for specific drugs, for specific drug products, which is what usually generic companies are talking about. Then we have these population models and model-based bioequivalence approaches, and we're just putting all of those together in one basket. And therefore, I find it really hard to put all together and then find something that would work for all those cases. I think Liang was suggesting that this would be different types, but even if they are different types, you cannot find the same let's say number of simulations or something, because that's totally specific to different types of those model matter files. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, thank you, Rebekah. It seems you have gone through what I've struggled before the presentation. When we think about the issue, same complexity or messiness come to me. There are so many either platform or systems parameters, or a good practice, or even like a user-friendly interface. So then we kind of looked into the drug master file. Seems they had gone through the same struggle. That's why there are five types of drug master file, including facility, manufacturing site. The process could be our best practice of building a model. They have drug substance, so that could be our product specific parameters. Then it fall into different types. Thanks for the comment.
Mark?
Just a little bit of thought of questions about what would be fall into the category of what takes to qualify. I'm thinking that it would be expected, it would be based on predicted performance, both within data in hand and possibly extrapolating to smaller people, younger people, older people, but probably not require things that aren't available if renal function was not in the model for whatever reason. You would not expect the model to predict adequately across the range of renal function. Is that the sort of thing that you're thinking of? I guess, Stella or Carl?
Yeah, you want to make sure you've captured everything that needs to be captured. So, and I'm not sure I could speak more specifically. Okay. Though I'm also thinking now of the pediatric extrapolation, where there are, adult data, adult information on the drug function, maybe under, certain sorts of renal impairment, whatever. And then you'd need a model to go back to the smaller people, right? The smaller, younger, different metabolic systems, sort of, the children, right? And maybe different children, different age groups, and neonates are going to be very different from teenagers.
Which likely would, and those parameters likely would not be included in sort of a standard adult model submitted for an NDA.
Right, and so you'd have to somehow tie these things together in order to extrapolate back for a pediatric qualification, pediatric waiver. And this is vague and pulls in lots of stuff, I understand, to Rebekah's point. But that's the kind of concerns that we would need to address.
So I like the concept of fit for purpose, which then requires evidence that the purpose has been fit, so to speak.
Yeah.
And we often do maybe it's a informal qualification of a model by creating a model, perhaps informed by one set of data, and then we qualify it by looking at tons of other data that didn't go into qualifying the model. It didn't go into constructing the model. Any model is going to be limited. We're not going to have a universal model that works in all instances. So, defining the domain in which it's fit for purpose, and then exercising it every way to Sunday to determine if it's actually working as intended. But this is all pretty vague. We need Stella's input in putting some rigor into our qualification standards.
I just, sort of going back to Rebekah, but now that Dr. Peck, said that, he's in favor of fit for purpose, I dare not to disagree with him. Even, sort of, as I said, I prefer the models from my perspective to be able to handle future questions as well and built with the open possibility and not just focus on the problem that we have got in hand. But my comment on what Rebekah said, I wish Uwe was here, because on the start of the meeting yesterday, actually he showed some examples. I want, sort of a little bit to exaggeration to make the point, but I would say in OCP, in some areas, I give the example so you can see that they have already got to the idea of the model master file without maybe knowing, without maybe intending for it, but the consequence and result has been all what we are talking about model master file. The examples that he showed, if you go, for instance, with regard to the PPI, and how the impact of the PPI now can be simulated, projected, and on the back of that a decision is made. That is a model master file. The only thing that you needed to know is the secret sauce, that particular company, what they were using as input parameters to the model master file that they were putting into OCP that got accepted. So we haven't got one or two cases, we have got more than 5. And this basically gives the message to everyone else that there is a model master file, even they are not calling it model master file. So PPI can be done using a model. To me, that is, sort of, it can't get any clearer than that, Rebekah.
So Amin, regarding your comment about a fit for purpose, I see two very general purposes. One is for interpolation and the other is for extrapolation. And so if we're talking about the latter, the standards must be much, much higher.
I agree with you, Dr. Peck. That's the point I was trying to bring up earlier. So I think right now, yesterday, when we had in the session 2, I think we talk about both session 1 and session 2 really touched upon the challenge in terms of how we can validate a model for the intended BE purpose. So I would argue the validation qualification probably for BE purpose would be different from that for pop PK, general pop PK purpose. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Andy, and also back to you again, I mean, after Andy.
I mean, I think I just want to, I don't know that I have anything more to contribute about the qualification, how to qualify models, but I think Rada was talking about other platforms, and there's other model sharing resources that all, I think, have some sort of qualification. And I was thinking about DD-More, which was a European initiative that ended, I guess, about 5 years ago, where this drug development model resource was the DD-More was what it stood for, where they had built up a model repository, as well as a way to qualify those models and to get experts to agree that the models were qualified for specific purposes. So I think anyway that there must be resources there in DD-More and maybe other model repository databases that can maybe give us hints about how we can think about qualification. We don't have to start from scratch.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
That's a very good example, Andy, but you know my view regarding DD-More. So the concept is absolutely true. DD-More did lots of these, and those people who are not familiar, I recommend to go and have a look. The reason DD-More did not pick up as much as originally everybody was basically hoping for is going back to the ownership that we were discussing. Nobody felt that they are owner of the system to actually push for its use, to sort of to give the support, etc., etc. So I think these are the elements that it is just having it is not enough. The ownership, upgrade, all those things that we are talking about, that basically helps with the idea of the model massified and reusability to go forward. Otherwise, we know that there are many of these that they are qualified very well, and sort of more than one group they looked at when we were doing all those DD-More and so on. But
when you say ownership, do you mean incentive?
No, I mean in the case of DD-More, there are so many different models, but there isn't any owner of the let's say DD-More database to come and basically provide sort of information that people can actually to publicize its use, to educate people how to use it, to have some incentive to do that, sort of, is not just basically, it doesn't exist. Yes, we have got, several volunteers that, for the last 5, 6, 7 years since DD-More finished, they have been putting their own time, but they have got full-time job to do, so that you can't blame them, for not putting DD-More in the forefront of what they are doing. So this is basically what we are talking about, ownership of that model masterfied, and somebody basically their livelihood, is in favor of the model master file being used by wider group is very important.
Which gets back to our the first question about how do you get people to actively participate? What's the incentive?
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I think, that is a different problem. That's really a management problem, and how you make something live and be applied. And, you just need to make that somebody's job or like somebody's career, and then it happens. Like, I think it's idea. Clearly, it's been very well. DD-More has been very well participated into, and everybody wants to share and make the knowledge work. I think maybe the outcome was more because the structure was not appropriate and it didn't have a long term. So I think that's that's really something that's solvable down the road. But it's a really good example of sharing the knowledge and sharing the models that they can be used by others, and they are being used, whoever sort of knows how to access DD-More. So I think we can solve that, how to manage and how to promote the use, and how that's, that can be easily solved.
But that is exactly the point, Rada, that sort of European Commission, as it was publicized in the newspapers. They were basically saying for 20 million euros that we have put, have we got 20 million euro back? And that is the question, sort of, for whatever that goes in, there should be, that continuation plan. And of course, yes, there were many positives in it, but also we have to accept that, some elements, were not working.
Just to follow up,
Any-
I feel like if you put a business hat on that and, you know, associate initiatives such as DD some sort of business related metrics down the road, and you have funded initiative to implement and follow, you know, like basically measure that down the road, that sort of, you know, that's what's been lacking. But again, that's something that can be solvable, and really to demonstrate the value. I agree, the value has not been demonstrated. The potential was there, but the value has not been measured and demonstrated.
Thank you. So now we are moving to the next question. Mark, do you want to take over next question?
Yeah, I'd like to take the pressure off our FDA colleagues and go with one of the questions from the chat, directed at Dr. Rostami. I think you're looking at this to the glass of drug-oriented modeling when the focus is getting the system model right, when a single drug set of clinical data is going to offer. What is a single drug set of clinical data going to offer? So we only go on a change. And there's a widespread report the model is not working.
This is going back, you know, to Mark, to, you know, all the discussions on the fitting that we were talking about, you know, sort of when we talk about these model master files, they are, I see majority of them to have a main part being drug independent. And because of that, we are not talking about, you know, model master file as a result of certain set of clinical studies for one drug. We go and change everything in the model master file, because the model master file, you have to remember, was built without, you know, this particular drug. It was built on the back of several other, whatever you want to call it, verification cases, validation cases, etc. And it was qualified. Therefore, when we want to go and say that, you know, sort of on the back of this particular set of data, now I need to change my model. No, it doesn't work like that. Model master file should not be changed as a result of one particular certain set of clinical study, because then, you know, I think Viera also mentioned, then, you know, all the previous verification for it basically goes out of the window. If somebody is going to change anything in these models when they are open source, and they can, or, you know, by changing some values, you know, that they have got in the closed form, that they can still change the values, then they have to justify and bring all the verifications that they were in place for their model master file before.
Is that answer though specific to system pharmacology PBPK models, where you do have the bulk of the knowledge is sort of drug independent?
Correct.
Is that applicable to other domains, POP-PK models in particular, where, you know, frankly, the structure of the model is a series of checkboxes, 1 compartment, 2 compartment, 3 compartment, etc. Yeah, and the real information is in the parameter values.
Correct. And that is the reason I said that the philosophy, it is very different. Yes.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And so that would sort of split out all the concerns, legitimate concerns about how we make these to generic companies in particular, who want to come up with an efficient route to getting a generic drug on the market, as opposed to a potential competitor who has another ADC on the same backbone, where much of the content of the model would be applicable.
I see, of course, halfway models, Mark, as well. For instance, you know, some elements of the target mediated, you know, sort of things that we do, which are mainly, you know, you can do it obviously via POP-PK. They may have also some elements that they are system oriented. For instance, if you are putting something on the level of the FcRn, you know, that, you know, is binding and, you know, then it extends the half-life, etc. If we know the value of, you know, let's say how the FcRn changes in pediatric, going what, you know, Stella was saying earlier on, that is, you know, part of the, you know, the model. That's not specific to that drug. So it can be used, but we shouldn't actually put the models in two completely different basket of completely system and completely public. So, but you are right. We have got a trajectory that basically model master file understanding, going back to what Rebekah was saying, gets much easier when we are talking about quantitative systems pharmacology type of models. The more we
more
go
generalizable.
That's right. More we move towards the classical models, it uses its basically meaning and value to me.
Yeah. Other comments? And I guess I can imagine that mechanistic IBIBC models would fall on that spectrum of fairly simple structural models where the parameters are the key to more detailed mechanistic models where the fundamental understanding of the system is the value. And mechanistic IBIBC models fall somewhere between those two.
I believe so, and we have actually a publication a couple of years ago. Those people who don't know, I will put in the chat, by Marilyn Martinez of FDA was co-author on that, and we have actually looked at those, but I will put that in the chat.
If I can just follow up on that. So one aspect is the physiology, the system parameters, right? That is the validation that is validated across multiple examples. But let's keep in mind that when generic companies trying to create a specific product, they need to fill that model with the values specific for that product, right? So there is
some of them, not all of them.
Yeah, so there is that additional validation that they do need to provide, right? They know that whatever system parameters are used are correct, but now they need to show that the parameters specific for their compound and the drug product are also working. Right? So it's that additional level of validation that they still need to provide.
Other comments?
Yeah, and then the question is this the model master file with drug specific parameters, or is the master file only the system parameters without drug specific?
Yeah, so I think this same discussion we could have, again, we are going back to the different types of model master files, and we could be answering these same types of questions for every level of the model master file. And the answers would be very different for every level of that model type, right? And Rebekah, as you already pointed out, in this discussion, we are mixing all of the levels, but it may need to be separated into different levels of those types.
And then a mechanism provided to if a company feels a need, or ultimately the position is taken that the company is permitted to protect certain parts of their files, but other parts of it should be public. That would be a continuation of part of that discussion, negotiation about how much of it is public and how much of it is private and can be reused or cannot be reused.
Yeah, making that public is easy. You just publish it.
Right.
Then the part unpublished still remain to be secret. Yes. But I would think that's a little bit.
So we have other comments. I don't see other comments. Do we have time for one more question in the 2 minutes remaining?
I have one more question to the audience, to the panel. If you are not, if we still have 2 minutes quickly. So how just want to get your assessment on for model master file. Do you think the systems pharmacology model or systems biology model? I know there are DD more other type of value to hold models, but for regulatory utility, in my understanding, I see there have been many used for drug discovery, less for drug development. So based on your expertise, expert knowledge, do you see there's any, what would be if we want to consider them as the model master file by FDA, say, per se, do you see a near future for them? Do you have a caveat to give for systems pharmacology, systems biology? It's always been puzzling me with so many equations, so many parameters not validated. So just want to see your opinion.
I wonder if it's realistic to get any objective opinions here, since pretty much everyone on this panel is on one side or the other. I think I know what Amin would say.
I think that would also depend on the purpose, right? If we are talking here about the generics, right? The pharmacology, the toxicology is established. We are trying to get the same performance in vivo. So would that be still applicable within this framework that we are discussing here for the generic drug development?
If we do not limit the topic to generics, excipient effect, for example, can we trust that the model predicted excipient toxicity? If we put two excipient, a combination of excipient together, that could lead to some unexpected safety concern.
Well, I see this as a work in progress. We need I think we need a specific proposed model to put our arms around. I mean, conceivably there can be hybrid models in which there's a key component, the systems pharmacology, but is surrounded by a more familiar model with fewer parameters. It's a little bit out of my domain. I think probably Amin could comment on this one.
I will use, what you said, it is true, these models are very big, very chunky, but, when we are qualifying them, as, many other people also commented, we are qualifying them for a specific, as you said, it's fit for purpose. Even they have built for beyond that particular purpose. So the use of these models, for instance, as I said, now for the PPI interactions, to me, that is a prime example. Yes, model is much, much bigger. It has got many other elements, but the bit that is relatively qualified and we have got adequate examples that they have been accepted is basically interaction with the PPI in a way that we can say, yes, it's going to happen, it's not going to happen, do this or do that, without conduct of clinical study. They have got to that point.
Rita, we will turn it over to you before we close this panel discussion.
Yeah, so I think I agree these models are big and complex and hard to build. I feel like in my experience, these are the models we've spent longest time building to get a really good qualified model with a fit for purpose. And it's just taking too long time. However, I am still a believer this is a great way to integrate the knowledge. And maybe we can rename them. We used the word in the past, mechanistic models, I think, which is really what is somewhere in between and what is really helpful. And I'm a big fan of models that integrate both immunology and pharmacology, for example, because clearly there's a lot of in future, if we think there's a lot of joint developments of different therapies that can stimulate both sides, the drug dependent and immune dependent component. And I found these very, very useful and very applicable to different and very translatable and with a great potential for impact. So I would not sort of discard, that we should keep building systems pharmacology models or mechanistic models or every label we use, because I think there is some work to do, but I think there's remaining with a great potential in those.
Thank you, Rita. I'm so glad to hear you're still a strong believer. A lot of interesting and stimulating discussions. So thank you all, the speakers and our panel members. So now we will give the floor to Dr. Liang Zhao, who is the director of the Division of Quantitative Methods and Modeling. He will provide the final closing remarks.
Yeah, I will make it short and sweet. And thank you all for first of all, for these panel members. Before I close out the workshop, yesterday, we are more in the conventional area of modeling, including experience learned and perspective on using model integrated evidence in the regulatory context for generic drug development. And then we had a session on the use of the same model or modeling strategy across multiple submissions, especially focusing on complex drug products. Then in the third session, we focus on using mechanistic modeling approaches to support B assessment for oral products. All the sessions generated very productive valuable input and comment with the participation from the audience. Today, we have covered two unconventional subject areas. The first session is on the development of quantitative comparative approaches to support complex generic drug development, which include methods to process multi-featured analytical profiles, API, complex API sameness analysis, particle size distribution, and dissolution profile analysis. Although they do not belong to the conventional area of modeling simulation, but they are very important, indispensable piece in drug development, especially in the generic field. And we are calling for more innovative approaches that could be implemented in the regulatory setting to generate great values for drug developers and for the agency. The second session, which we just concluded, is on model sharing, acceptance, communication with FDA. We, with the top experts in the field, we have convinced further advanced the thought on how to develop a model master file, what the elements of it, and what are the types and processes to generate them. There's what are the potential challenges, and also we touch base on even the legal aspect. Could it serve as the incentive to the modeling community to generate to further advance the modeling impact for drug development? We also been leveraging experience lessons learned from the new drug side as well. There are good comments like, can we also review master files that not associated with a particular application? You know, the biomarker qualification process being used as the reference along with the emerging technologies from OPQ. That's pretty much the content we have covered today, and I feel we have gained a lot. I have my most sincere appreciations to all the panel members, speakers. We also apply some new features in this workshop and I try to address as many questions as possible. And we have seen many constructive and valuable questions from the audience. We have a very good panel audience and expert to audience to panel interactions. We didn't have a chance to address all of your questions. We will make sure to provide some response in our future workshop summary that is anticipated to come out earlier next year. At the end, I want to reiterate the great value generation by deepening the impact of modeling simulation in the generic drug program. With valuable knowledge information generated, accumulated from new drug development, and we do not want to duplicate things unless necessary. And really, we want to take advantage to make one step further in using model-generated information to further abbreviate the generic program, to roll out high-quality drug product, to gain quicker access to the general public for high-quality products. As Dr. Robert Lamberg mentioned at the opening, 90% of the medications we are using are generics. We are serving the general public through innovative approaches. In this case, we are using modeling approaches to further quicken the elevate the process for the public to gain high quality generics. At the end, I want to thank CRCG colleagues, Dr. Jim Pauly, Anna Schraneman, Visha, Dana, Jennifer, as well as my FDA colleagues, particularly Yuqing out of Viera, as the meeting chairs, for their stellar job to plan, coordinate, and organize the workshop. I also want to thank all the presenters again, the panelists, and the audience for your active participation. My apologies if I've left anyone out. With that, I would like to thank all the workshop contributors, participants again, and announce the closure of this productive workshop. Looking forward to seeing and talking to you in other venues. With that, I want to announce the closure of the workshop, and I hope you enjoy the coming weekend, and let's keep in touch. Thanks.